I first heard about Hart Island when I was working on a story about a formerly homeless man. He had lived in the tunnels underneath Penn Station, I think. There was a photographer who photographed the little house he had made himself there. And because of her work, he had been rescued, he'd been given a home, and then he'd been found dead in that home. And he was going to go to Hart Island. And there was such sadness at the idea that this man who had finally achieved a home of his own was going to be dispossessed. It was going to be one of the multitude in these anonymous graves. I'm a New Yorker, and I believe that New York is more than, the old idea of the city on the hill. New York is really what America is about. And there is a tragedy inherent in a big metropolis. There are all these stories of the chances gone by, the mistakes, the bad childhood, bad choices, or just bad luck. That's something that any great metropolis contends with. But there's something more here, that you could have a loving family, a career, money set aside. And you could still end up in a mass grave on an island off limits to the public, buried by inmates paid 50 cents an hour.
The wind rises in from the sound, carrying the clang of the bell buoy from nearby City Island, tolling its fitful warning. All around is desolate and sad. No kind hand to decorate these graves with trophies of love and remembrance. Not even a headstone to show where is interred what was once a human being.
I think people have understood since Roman antiquity that cities eat many of their inhabitants. The word Potter's Field, after all, is biblical, but it really means a place, an industrial area where people used to dig clay, and that's where you put the bodies of the city ate up. Every city has a place for the burying of the poor. Hart Island is, like everything in New York, sort of bigger and grander and slightly grungier. So in that sense, Hart Island represents, a city which spat out 1 million people.
We must always value the individual life, particularly in a city like New York, where too often we reduce people to teeming masses, immigrants, the refuse of the world. They make us forget sometimes that behind every one of those bodies at Hart Island was a lived life, aspirations, loved ones. It seems to me that all those 1 million+ folks buried in Hart Island offer us a kind of record of lived life in New York City. In many cases anonymous, in many cases the people are unknown, in many cases we know very little about the people buried there. Nonetheless, these lives matter, and they mattered.
A ver, en mi imaginación, lo que yo tengo de él siempre son sus fotos. La imagen que tengo de mi papá es el hombre alto, apuesto, fuerte, guapo. No, mira, él trabajaba en un frigorífico, mira. Estaba todo chiquitico, la familia pequeña, todos pequeñitos éramos aquí. Buena de verdad, una familia buena. No es que el dinero no haga falta ni nada, pero aquí estábamos unidos, estábamos juntos y él siempre se preocupaba mucho por nosotros y entonces, no sé. La familia, por más que todo, lo que tiene que estar es unida. En ese momento no lo pensamos mucho. Bueno, se va y aparte, en aquel tiempo todo el mundo se iba. Que todos los cubanos estaban haciendo eso. Que no nos preocupáramos, que él nos iba a volver a ver otra vez, que él siempre nos iba a ayudar, nunca se iba a olvidar de nosotros. Ya, bueno, papi se va y ya, y vamos a esperar a ver qué pasa. No pensábamos nunca que iba a ser todo esto así, que nunca más lo íbamos a ver. En el corazón así que no pudimos hacer nada por él, los tres hermanos. Ninguno de nosotros tres.
My baby was already sick, so I already knew that there was a 50-50 chance of him living or dying. Gave birth to him. I didn't have the financial to be able to bury him and stuff. So the hospital gave me a week for me to, collect the money. I went to the welfare day after day, day after day, the entire week that I was given, and they said no. And at that point, I didn't know my real mother, I didn't know my real family. So it's like I really didn't have nobody. I was alone out here, living actually, literally alone. I can't be ungrateful because me living under public assistance, New York City has been helping my children a lot. But when it comes to my son, they failed me completely because I put all my trust on them. I put my child's body in their hands to bury him. It's not the way I wanted, but I figure at least he's gonna be buried. He'll be at peace. But he wasn't.
Well, when Hart Island is open, New York is on the cusp of yet another enormous rush of growth. The city's population basically doubled every 20 years. New York City is the commercial capital of America. It's the center of its publishing industry. It's the center of fashion. And of course, next to the glitz, next to the glamour, next to the mansions being built by A.T. Stewart or the Vanderbilts, you have the reality of the 5 Points, the slums, the very, very difficult lives lived by most New Yorkers, that is to say, the working class and the poor. New York is forced to create a whole series of institutions to deal with the realities of tens of thousands of immigrants coming into the city continually. There was a sense, I think, that these people needed to be separated out, that people were not comfortable seeing the insane, seeing the paupers, seeing elderly alcoholics on the streets of New York. And many of these institutions, prisons, lunatic asylums, hospitals, all were erected, created outside Manhattan on these islands in the East River.
There was Welfare Island, there were the Quarantine Islands, and of course Ellis Island. And these were all various processing stations. Hart Island was the terminal island. So this archipelago that New York City is, it is sort of part of the great digestive system of the metropolis. It's this perpetually renewing population of people who come for an opportunity, or because they're fleeing something, or because they want to reinvent themselves, who wash up in New York, and perhaps they do not find a way of, quote, making it. And so they exist on the fringes. New York has had to, just out of necessity, cultivate this kind of indifference. This is something that all great cities have in common to one degree or another, but New York City is an exaggeration of this process.
In the 1890s, early 1900s, every spring, the police department would have to fish out scores and scores of bodies that floated to the surface in the harbor or in the rivers. What do you do with these bodies? Most of them totally anonymous. These folks went to Hart Island. This is a place that New York has to have to service the reality of death.
I think New Yorkers understand that there are always going to be inequalities in this city, huge inequalities, and they're in very sharp focus. But in death, we're equal. We all die alone. In today's world, you have so many families who are estranged or just lost to each other by distance, by misfortune. And yet, to know that someone you once loved or that you hoped loved you is buried in a mass grave on Hart Island, that resonates forever.
Nosotros como tal, los muertos los respetamos mucho. Yo misma voy a la tumba de mi mamá, aparte de que, nosotros pensamos que los muertos están en el cementerio. Tenemos y no podemos ni ponerle una flor en un lugar porque él no está con nosotros. Y la tenemos ahí, pero ¿dónde está él? No tenemos dónde verlo ahí. Cuando papi decidió venir para acá, ¿cómo te puedo decir? Era como una euforia, que todos los cubanos estaban haciendo eso. estando allí, yo los voy a ayudar y ustedes van a salir adelante y no se preocupe. Y como ya te dije, como era la euforia en aquel momento, pero bueno, yo decía, bueno, esa fue su decisión y hay que respetarla. Mami, a ver, ¿cómo te puedo explicar? Los primeros años que ella se fue, que el papi viene para acá, ella, como siempre, como que tuvo la ilusión de que ella iba a venir para acá con él y con nosotros. Un momento que ella estuvo muy triste porque se le dio a mi papá una oportunidad de invitar a una persona. Y él, en vez de invitarla a ella, que se suponía que era ella la que tenía que invitar, invitó a mi abuela, a su mamá y a su hermana. Y después la fue limando y no sé qué, y entonces ella pero eso sí se le quedó a ella siempre en su interior. ¿Por qué? Si la que le correspondía ir allá era a mí, que soy su esposa. Y eso fue una tristeza muy grande para mi mamá, porque yo la veía sola. Mi hermano me dice, no, él tiene una relación. Yo me dije, pero, papi, no sé. Y mantenía a Mima, nos mantenía a nosotros. ¿Cómo podía hacer tantas cosas a la vez? A ver, el último contacto que tuvimos con él, 2008, en el año 2008, sí. Que él nos llamó y entonces lo sentimos un poquitico como que extraño, como que estaba divagando. Le decíamos preguntas y él como que nos respondía con otra, lo que le preguntábamos no era lógico lo que él nos respondía. Como vimos que no contactaba con nosotros, comenzamos las averiguaciones. Lo llamábamos, no salía el número, no contestaba a nadie. Hasta que, bueno, como a los 6 o 7 meses, ya en el 2009, ya él, nos mandaron el documento de que estaba ingresado en un hospital con demencia, que no sabía de él. Entonces ahí nos mandaron toda esa documentación para ver si podía ir alguien allá a cuidarlo. Ahí ya eso fue lo último que supimos de él.
We got married in 1982, and we got married at my sister's house because I never wanted a big wedding. I was never the one to be in front of wear a dress and have all these people that, sometimes you don't even know half of them. Why would you want them there at your wedding? But there were a lot of great times with Bruce, a lot. And when he started spiraling down, that was in '84, we moved right next to a bar called Lady L's. We used to go to Lady L's on Friday nights, got a babysitter for Kimberly, and he started hanging out with a lot of different people and started drinking heavily. And the bar was right next door, which was not the greatest thing. Didn't think that anything of it when we moved to the house, but it happened, and
I remember vodka bottles being under the bed, hidden, and then they would argue constantly. So I just remember my childhood not wonderful. I think that he hurt his back at work, and he got addicted to pain medication, and then cocaine, then alcohol, and he just spiraled downhill.
A lot of times at night, I wouldn't stay home. I would sleep over my girlfriend's house with the dog and, of course, my daughter. And my mother called up one night, and I wasn't there yet because I stayed at Eileen's house. And my mom said, what kind of a daughter are you? You don't come home at night? What is wrong with you? And I broke I broke down in tears because now they knew. My secret is coming out. He was better off out of the picture if he couldn't be straight, because it would just hurt her, would hurt her too much. If you're in a relationship, you have to be us, has to be family. If it's not family, it's not a relationship, it's not love, it's not there.
He would always enter my consciousness. I would always wonder is he okay? What is he doing? Is he living on the streets? Even when I would go to Manhattan when I was younger, I would always wonder if that was him. You know, I'd always want to give money to those people because I felt like that was my dad. Like, I hoped, which people don't hope, that he was either in the hospital or in jail, where I would get that one moment that he was sober. And I never got it. And the fact that he was in a hospital and nobody contacted any family members and then hid his body for 3 years is crazy.
So in the world today, everyone knows America as the land of freedom and opportunity. Because you see me in front of you now. But prior to seeing me here, you didn't know of me, except for one thing. He is less than a man. He is not America. He is the slave that built America. This is the twosome of every man and woman of color. Now we at the point when we stumble upon a part of history that do encounter us as a people of color, of honor, of respect. Hart and Rikers Island at the time of 1860 was being converted into Camp Astor. There was mustered in over 200,000 soldiers of color. America was not America at that time. It was Confederacy in the South and the Union up in the North. And what brought us together was the Civil War. If it wasn't for these men, we would not be free today. If it wasn't for those United States colored troops, we would not be as proud as we are today. United States colored troops were definitely on that island. And there still are certain little indications that there are still a few bodies that still remain. And in us knocking at the door, who is there to open it? A correctional department. I've never so been humiliated than to have a correction officer direct me in prayer.
When the burials began in 1869, the Department of Charities and Correction was one city agency. And what happened more recently was the Department of Welfare pulled out of Hart Island and left the Department of Correction in charge of these burials. So it used to be that there was a dead house at the end of 26th Street and a dock. And in the dead house, the bodies which were unclaimed were put in these boxes and then put onto a boat. There were 2 steamships. One was called Hope and the other was called Fidelity.
The boat backs up to the dead house and takes the coffins with their ghastly freight. They are shoved rudely down a slide like the various merchandise. And as they strike the deck, we hear the thud of the body in its rude receptacle. Business is good today, the Sharon of the Stick says. As we count the coffins heaped up promiscuously, we think so too. We steam away and soon touch at Blackwell's Island. Here the bodies of those who died of smallpox and other contagious diseases are taken on board. Charity Hospital is also visited and contributes its quota. The coffins are bundled out to men who cart them away into a field, handling them as rudely as baggage masters to trucks at a depot. The trenches are about 15 feet deep and 6 feet wide. The coffins are piled up like wood in cords or fuel in a coal pit, 13 deep. As soon as the coffin is placed at the bottom of the trench, a barrow of dirt is thrown over it and another coffin placed above. Children's coffins are chucked in at the feet of the others and help to form a solid mass. A foot of earth is then thrown upon the upper one until the work is completed. Thus, all nationalities rest close together. The murderer is a close companion of the thief, and the suicide is just beneath the pauper. There is no aristocracy.
I first heard of Hart Island from a physician who was at Harlem Hospital, and she was talking about infants that were born addicted to crack and that they were buried in shoeboxes, 1,000 at a time on Hart Island. And at that time, Hart Island was open to journalists and to academics. And so I decided that I was just going to get there. And it just so happened that that day was the very first day that these inmates had ever been on Hart Island. And these were young men convicted of misdemeanors like turnstile jumping, graffiti. So, you know, they're not felons or anything like that. They're young men that couldn't afford a good lawyer.
Oh, I used to live in Red Hook. That was one of the bad neighborhoods by the Battery Tunnel in Brooklyn. And New York City, and it was crazy in '89. It was crack and stuff like that, and we used to sell weed and drugs and stuff like that, and I wound up getting caught with possession, and I wound up going to Rikers Island for a little bit of time. In those days, it was a zoo. You could get anything. You could get a knife, anything. One time the guy had a gun in there. It was like gladiator school every day. And so when I got short means that you're going home. You don't have a lot of time left in your sentence. They gave me a job in Hart Island. Next thing you know, they put some shackles on you and they take you in a little bus and then they take you on a boat. I'm a little scared because I'm in handcuffs. I'm on the boat thinking the boat's gonna go down. I think the worst or whatever. And they take you to Hart Island and I I still didn't know that Hart Island was Potter's Field. I heard of Potter's Field in movies and stuff like that, but I didn't even know what it meant. And there's only 2 offices, no fence, no nothing, and there was a smell. I don't know what the smell was. So the next morning, it's raining, and they tell you we're gonna go to work. We walked to this big hole, but it was graves. And then there were mass graves with wooden boxes. And we're gonna move them to put more boxes in there. And the people that are there are John Does or people that nobody wants to pay for, or people that get lost in the system. They were like 5 deep, and it was a big hole. There was little coffins in the grave. And the guys would all talk about them, and they would just say crack babies. Even though who knows what they were there for, but that's the mentality they had, that those were like undesirables or whatever, that they didn't count or whatever.
When our mayor took office, he was elected because of his campaign on our city being a tale of 2 cities, the haves and the have-not. And those who have not are usually the ones who wind up being buried on Hart Island. The difficulty in government, especially when you're the mayor and you're managing a very large city, the priorities of the public take shape and become the most important issues you address. And not many people bring Hart Island to elected officials' attentions. It is out of sight and out of mind to so many New Yorkers. People just don't care that much unless they have a personal connection. It shouldn't be so removed from the rest of the city. We should know what happens after people die. We should be able to see that space.
The fact that we're using inmates to maintain this active burial site where 1 million souls are buried, where so much of New York City history is buried, is Dickensian. And it is a document of the inequality that has existed in this city for centuries.
I don't think the States is unique in this respect. If you're poor in this world or you're not powerful, you get forgotten pretty quickly. And Hart Island is exactly where our society and our country puts the people who are poor and forgotten. And you have, a situation you couldn't make up in which you have the poor and forgotten people who are alive and are in jail, who are burying the poor and forgotten people who are dead.
Cuando papi dejó de comunicarse con nosotros, nos preocupamos muchísimo, ¿no? Con toda la documentación que nos había mandado ese abogado, era muy difícil que nosotros pudiéramos ir allá. Por el problema de la política de Estados Unidos y Cuba, era muy difícil. Porque hubo un momento en que nos pudimos contactar con el hospital. Hablamos con una señora que se llamaba Lili. Le decía, ella era colombiana, Lili. y ella nos dio el teléfono de su casa. La llamábamos a su casa y ella decía que sí, que papi, que por qué no. Ella decía, ¿por qué uno de ustedes no viene a cuidar a su papá? Su papá es muy bueno. ¿Por qué ustedes no vienen a cuidar a su papá, a atenderlo, porque él está solo aquí? Muy mal llorando, pobrecita. Y nos dijo, no te preocupes, vamos a ver qué podemos hacer con esa situación. Tú verás que vamos a poder ir allá. Pero no se pudo hacer nada. Eso sí, ella se murió con eso, de que no pudimos hacer nada con papi. El hospital nunca nos avisó de que papi había fallecido, nunca. Y ellos tenían todos nuestros datos. Nos enteramos por una periodista del New York Times, Nina, que fue la que nos llamó y fue la que nos los dijo.
The case of Ciro Ferrer, this man who came here from Havana. When I talked to his daughter, she said he was a good father. He really went to support them. They spoke, they were photographs sent back, and then suddenly silence. He had been found wandering in the street near the apartment where he lived alone. He had dementia. He was placed in a nursing home. He told a court evaluator that he had a wife and children in Cuba. And yet, the court appointed guardian who was collecting $400 a month from his Social Security and giving the rest to the nursing home never contacted them.
Hola, ¿español?
¿Quién?
¿Puedo hablar un momentico con usted?
Creo que te equivocaste de número, ¿no?
No, disculpa. Es que mi papá vivía en este apartamento hace muchos años que falleció y entonces ahora fue que tuve la oportunidad solamente de pasar por acá y quería, no sé, ver el apartamento, pero no hay problema ninguno, ¿ok? Solamente era para saber la dirección y ver dónde él vivió tantos años en esta ciudad, ¿ok? Muchas gracias.
Ok, no hay problema.
Dale, cuídate. Porque es que estaba...
¿Salir del carro un momentico para hablar?
Un segundo nada más. Un segundo. Gracias. Fíjate si él es bueno, que mira, que te puso ahí delante de nosotros.
Sí, por eso yo le digo, y yo vine a lavar porque como vivía aquí 15 años, yo le digo a mi papá, siempre lavamos aquí. Pero cuando yo te escucho decir eso, mi papi me dice, mami, ¿será don Ciro? Que ella está preguntando. Le digo, yo le voy a preguntar.
Sí.
Y ahí pues dije, negrita, venga, usted está preguntando.
Ay, mira eso, sí.
Yo lo conocí muy bien y hablábamos de cuando iba al Chicha allá y que era todo cachetudo,
un galán.
en medio de mujeres, porque era un bizcocho.
Sí,
Ciro, un bizcocho.
Así mismo.
Pero pasamos muy buenos momentos y disfrutó su vida don Ciro. Aunque sea con su traguito, pero disfrutó.
Sí, lo malo era eso, que se puso a tomar, yo no sé.
Entonces ya se nos caía, se quedaba en cualquier sitio acostado, entonces había que traerlo, subirlo.
No sé por qué le pasó eso, si en Cuba no era bebedor ni nada así.
Aquí, pues las amistades y todo eso,
sí.
La soledad, porque decíamos, don Ciro, solo, ni una compañía, ni nadie, ¿quién será la familia? Y le decíamos, don Ciro, no esté tomando mucho, no esté tomando que usted le está haciendo daño eso, y mira, se nos quedó acá arriba y allá arriba.
I was sitting one day with my friend in her living room, and we had started speaking about him again. And I was like, wow, my baby is gonna be 12 years. And she was like, where was it that the city buried him again? I'm like, honestly, I really don't know. The only thing that I know is Hart Island. I went back to the hospital where I gave birth, and they were like, Yeah, but you have to communicate with the correctional facility. I called, and the lady that I spoke to, she was like, yes, that the baby was there. You have to sit there and wait for police officers to actually open the gate and let you in. They actually make you sign papers before you even get on the ferry. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? Is the Department of Corrections, they're gonna treat us like if we visiting a jail. But once the captain got close to us and asked me, did anybody notify you? I'm like, notify me about what? And that's when he gave me the news. We can't find your child here. I'm like, I just broke down right there. My oldest daughter, she broke down crying. If he's not there, where he at, Mommy? Every day they ask, did you speak to the lawyer? Did they find Anthony? Are we gonna finally go visit Anthony? I'm like, no, we have to sit down and wait. It's out of my hands now. Now we just have to wait and see where is Anthony at. Every time I call, there's different people that answer the phone. All they keep telling me is that there's a check-in when they brought my baby in, but there's no check-out. Where he at, what they did to his body. You know, how can the city just lose a tiny body? How is that? It's not possible.
Long ago, it was said that one half of the world does not know how the other half lives. That was true then. It did not know because it did not care. The half that was on top cared little for the struggles and less for the fate of those who were underneath, so long as it was able to hold them there and keep its own seat. In New York, the youngest of the world's great cities, that time came later than elsewhere.
Riis was a Danish immigrant who came to America at the age of 20 in 1870, spent 5 years as a homeless person, and then worked as a newspaper reporter for 23 years, covering the slums. He was immersing himself in the worst, most frightening, demoralizing part of New York City's life. And he had the brilliant idea of using photographs to give people an image that went with his words. So this is really the beginning of what we would understand as photojournalism.
Riis had been a police reporter for many years before he took photographs. And as a police reporter, he was assigned to go with the NYPD to do all these things that cops had to do in those days. It was not so much about fighting crime as it was being a kind of social service agency for the city. Cops had to fish out dead bodies from the rivers and the harbors. Cops had to help lost children. Cops were helping to give vaccinations in the tenements. So Riis, by reporting on the police, got a tremendous education in the underside of New York life. Now, the title of his most famous book, How the Other Half Lives, is actually a kind of ironic joke. A more accurate title would have been How the Other Three Quarters Lives.
How the Other Half Lives was a tour of the slums in which he used everything he knew about the neighborhood that he'd spent over 10 years reporting on and describing very colorful language, a way of life unknown to his audience, which was essentially a middle-class audience. Was not really someone very concerned with composing images, in large part because of the very primitive camera that he was using, where he would come into a crowded lodging house when people were sleeping and set off a gun, actually, literally a gun with the flash powder, and create a big boom and wake people up and capture them. I mean, it's not at all respectful of his subjects in the pictures, and that's exactly what they convey, which is the indignity of their lives. This tour really ends at Hart Island because it's a really critical subject for his story. It's the climax of his story. In a chapter called The Common Herd, he describes the end of their lives in this way. One free excursion awaits young and old, whom bitter poverty has denied the poor privilege of the choice of the home in death they were denied in life. The ride up the Sound to the Potter's Field, charitably styled the city cemetery. But even there, they do not escape their fate. In the common trench of the poor burying ground, they lay packed 3 stories deep, shoulder to shoulder, crowded in death as they were in life.
There's a legend about people that grow up in Brooklyn that we're very strong stock. We're very straightforward, and we're people that have resources. My resource has always been my family. As I grew up, I went through all of the racial discriminatory situations that the world knows of today that happen in America. I have learned the humiliation of being that man. The Civil War freed the slaves. Vietnam was my Civil War. It's the first place I ever felt whole as a man. It's the first place in my life that I ever met a man of my opposite color that was true to heart and soul about life and death with me. His name was Richard. He's gone and been gone since he was 19 years old. Was our machine gunner. He is that boy from Arkansas who taught me of white and black love. Man becomes family with man, with war. Comradeship, we call it. During my trial of warriorship, my wife was 17 years old and pregnant with my second pregnancy. She gave birth in St. Albans Naval Hospital. And when I came back to the United States of America, I had no knowledge how to handle any of this type of a business. So when it was exposed to me that it was twins, I didn't even question where the other one was when they only showed me one. Now, that's a pivotal point because she's never spoken to me about it. That's because of our immaturity, our guilt with the situation. And everyone in the world knows no one wants to bury their family on Potter's Field. Who should have to go there?
I have a family video, an old one, and he's in it. And sometimes I'll just replay that just to know that he did care at any time. You know, the things that I remember about him, the majority was good things. The majority that I remember from him was that he tried to be around and there and, you know, as good of a person as he could. But drugs and alcohol just took over.
She said, "Do you think he'd ever come around?" I said, "I don't know, Kim. I don't know." I said, "He's always welcome as long as he's straight. If he's straight, he's more than welcome." Then she got to the point where she's 16. "I want to see my daddy. I really want to see him. Don't you think you can find him?" I said, "You know what, Kim? I'll do my best. I'll try to find him." So I called the bars where he hung out and his friends hung out. He had one friend, his name was Pete Torres. I left my phone number with the bartender and I said, "Listen, if Pete comes in or Bruce comes in or any one of his friends come in, have him call me because Kim really, really wants to see him. She wants to see her daddy." On Seaside Heights, when we met Bruce, he was happy to see Kimberly, he's happy to see me. He wore long sleeves, and she knew he was doing drugs. She could tell that. But they had a really good time. He won a TV set for her, and she was like ecstatic and said, "Well, Daddy, make sure you call me again. I want to see you again. This is, you know, this is good that we could get together."
I will always have him in my life now. I have a connection to him. I can call this cell phone and, you know, it didn't matter to me that he was a drug addict. I just wanted him in my life. So the fact that it was disconnected the next day, broke my heart.
I think he always wanted to have some kind of relation with Kim. He didn't want to lose it, but he couldn't control himself. He had the devil in him when he was born, I guess. And it was hard to fight it. And Kim always wanted closure. She always said to me, from, I guess, 16 all the way until she is now, that she said, I know deep down inside, I'll always talk to him. I'll always be able to tell him my piece of this story. And one day we get a phone call, and it's the New York Times are calling us up. And it's this woman, Nina Bernstein. And Nina said to me, do you know, are you related to Bruce Hansen? I said, yeah, that's my ex-husband. And she said, well, I have to tell you something.
It was really shocking to me to discover that New York state law, a law dating back to the 19th century, required the city to offer the bodies of unclaimed dead to medical schools for dissection. I learned that there were 22 cadavers that were in cold storage at Albert Einstein Medical School. You know, basically, these cadavers are just lent to the medical schools. They are supposed to then be returned to the city for what the city considers proper burial, which is a Hart Island trench. I tried very hard to learn the names of these cadavers because I wanted to reclaim their stories. One of the last of the 22 that day was Bruce Hansen. Even though his body had been in cold storage for 3 years, it had been on lists sent back and forth between the medical school and the medical examiner's office. The medical examiner's office had not done the first thing in terms of trying to find someone who knew Bruce Hansen and would care. And it was easy. Their job is to be the last and most important source of information about this person. They had his name. They had his name when he first arrived to the morgue. They had his name when they put him on a list to offer as a cadaver for dissection to the medical school. When I had the name and I did the first basic search, it came up immediately. His ex-wife in New Jersey. One phone call, and I had her. One phone call, and she was carrying the phone to her daughter.
Nobody called us. I never changed my last name. It's still Hansen. I live in the same state as New Jersey. Nina had no problem calling me up to find out. He shouldn't have ended up in there. They shouldn't have allowed that. And for 3 years being in Albert Einstein Hospital, just, you know, going through their medical procedures for 3 years, putting him in a cold box, pulling him out, cutting him up, it's awful. It's awful.
I'm angry at how it happened. I'm angry with the medical examiner, the hospital, the people, you know, that still won't give me information on him. You know, it's my father. I should have a right to know how he died. I'm never gonna find out. The medical examiner's office calling to find out what you know. The hospital not giving you a hard time about getting the records. Everybody's hiding something. So the hospital's working with the medical examiner, which is working with Hart Island. You know, they obviously don't want people to know most of the mistakes that they made or things that they just didn't care about. Think about all those bums on the street. You think they contacted every single person's family? They throw them probably in that island.
The wind rises in from the sound, carrying the clang of the bell buoy from nearby City Island, tolling its fitful warning. All around is desolate and sad. No kind hand to decorate these graves with trophies of love and remembrance. Not even a headstone to show where is interred what was once a human being. No one that sleeps there had a dollar to their name in life, few a good word said for them after death. The bodies interred here are as utterly forgotten and wiped away as if they never existed. And yet all those festering, rotting corpses which lie below here once had hopes, ambitions, likes and dislikes, tastes, sympathies like ourselves. But all that is not even now a remembrance.
You can't help but thinking when you look into an empty mass grave about who's going to be buried there and also about your own mortality. Human beings know that their lives are limited and that the reconciliation of that is the shaping of a community, feeling that you're a member of that community and that your life is extended through that community beyond your own lifetime. And that's, of course, the first thing that I saw going to Hart Island was that the inmates, when they were burying the dead, they were saying the prayers to themselves. There's a hopefulness to that the people whose rights are largely taken away, they still know how to commemorate the dead. So we know how to do this stuff because it's basic to who we are. And the reason we perform those rituals is because we all fear that our lives might not matter, that people will forget us. The indifference that exists comes out of enough people feeling that, oh, this couldn't happen to me. And what I've tried to show is, in fact, it happens to everyone. All human remains in New York City, if they are not claimed by family, must be buried on Hart Island. That's the only option. All human remains go to Hart Island. Still, not everyone is accounted for. So then what happens? We don't know.
New York City is just for vacation. New York City is just to come and have fun. New York City is not a place to actually be living in. It's nothing.
Hey, Katrina, so I wanted to bring you in today and talk a little bit about where we are with the case and the position and arguments the city's making and the fight that I'm having with the city, which continues. And I told them what you and I have talked about before. Like, if you tell us where the baby is, we'll drop the lawsuit today. That's what this is all about. That's what we're trying to find out. They don't believe us. They think it's about money. It's not. It's about a search for the truth. One of the issues for the city here, Katrina, is if we establish here that they don't know, there are other cases like yours that are out there pending, and they don't want to make bad law. They don't want to make bad precedent. So the further they can push us back and slow us down, the latter that these things, bad things will happen to the city. Part of their delay is to not let this case come to trial because there are other cases that are going to follow shortly behind.
Yeah, but I feel that they really ain't doing much because all they thinking is about the money.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I said, I'm not doing this for money. I want my son back. That's it.
What we know right now from the records that we have is that an autopsy was performed. The body at some point was at the morgue. We do have some indication on one of the records that the body was released for transport. At this point, we don't know if it was transport to some type of medical facility for research. We don't know where that baby was released to. We know where the baby was supposed to be released to, and that's to Hart Island. Any case that I'm involved in with the city of New York is always going to take me years. Getting records out of the city of New York requires motion after motion after motion for a judge to compel them to respond. They're more concerned with security issues and welfare issues and housing issues and all the things that make this city a unique and crazy place.
So most likely I won't. No matter how much we fight, we ain't gonna never have an answer.
I can never guarantee you that I'm gonna give you an answer to that question. And I know that's the most important thing to you, and that's been the focus of my case. Has always been about getting you those answers.
Okay. Well, I guess we're gonna keep fighting then. I need answers. I've been in New York since I was 15, and I was never a fan to New York. I came out here because I was mandated to come over here with my stepmother, but she ended up leaving me, so I've been by myself since I was 15 out here. It's been a rough life. Me being out here has been real rough. Because everybody that has come into my life has left right out. Nobody stays in my life. The only people that stays in my life is my kids. You know, it bothers me a little bit because the story went out in the newspaper and the comments that they've been putting, horrifying. They really put me down that I'm doing all of this for money, and I'm like, what money? I didn't even ask for money. Everybody just think about their tax money. How did I decide to keep having kids, knowing that I'm not financially stable? That doesn't mean anything. I'm poor, and that's how I've always been, and that's how I'm gonna keep living. I'm not planning on being rich.
Why did my forefathers come to Hart Island to join the Union Army? They came for one cry, to be free, equal men, period. And I feel very emotional about it because not only are the soldiers interred here, but so is my daughter. I named her Aisha. We ponder ourselves with many questions about our daughter. So we hope to bring closure to our family and to bring honor, love, and respect to a soul that we haven't had the opportunity to honor properly for almost 50 years to this day. Not to have touched the earth that she's buried in, it behooves me to go over there to lay the first wreath at her gravesite and pay my respects to my daughter who is buried on Hart Island in Potter's Field of the city of New York. Then I can continue my plight to bring the honor, respect, and some type of fitting memorial statue over on Hart Island for these soldiers of the Civil War.
Es una tristísima noticia, pero sabemos ya qué es lo que le había pasado. Y son cosas difíciles. Pero lo que me ha molestado es entonces que él tuvo esta relación aquí de tantos años, según me dijo mi hermano después. Y esa relación como que entonces lo dejó abandonado en el momento que él lo necesitaba, que mi mamá nunca lo hubiera hecho, porque mi mamá ese era el amor de su vida, y si él la hubiera traído allá para acá, ella nunca lo hubiera dejado abandonar a mi papá, nunca, porque hasta lo último que ya nos enteramos de que él estaba enfermito, no sé qué, ella falleció con todo aquel dolor de que ella no puede estar a su lado. Eso era lo que más nos afecta a nosotros, que cuando él, porque a ver, Mima, él se enfermó, falleció y nos tuvo a nosotros tres. Y él, que fue tan bueno como mi mamá, y no nos tuvo a nosotros. Entonces, eso sí no se nos quita de la mente a nosotros. Después de tanto tiempo.
After a long time.
Ay, qué bueno, me alegro mucho.
Yeah,
me alegro
very
mucho.
happy to be here.
De verdad. Y muchas gracias por todo, por todo. Eso es.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Gracias por
I think
compartir tu
it's very
historia.
important. So here you are.
Cuando Nina me habla de venir acá a Nueva York a buscar los restos de papi, dije, no, eso no va a ocurrir, nunca vamos a tener a papi con nosotros porque eso no se va a dar nunca. Eso solamente es una ilusión, ella no sabe que yo no voy a poder ir allá porque me van a decir que no. Los cubanos somos muy religiosos y más con los muertos, con las personas que fallecen. Los atendemos como si estuvieran ahí, Y no es lo mismo que él esté acá y en las condiciones que él estaba, a que esté con nosotros. Ya con nosotros todo va a ser diferente. Mi mamá está en un lugarcito muy bonito, tiene ahí sus restos, vamos. Pero bueno, honestamente, al estar yo con mi niño, con Nina, apoyándome, me sentí bien, bien en el sentido de que ya yo sabía que esa era la última vez que él iba a estar ahí. Y vas a estar con tu familia en Cuba, para que esté al lado de mi mamá, para que estén los dos juntos. Allá sí te vamos a tener bien, ya. Se acabó tu estancia aquí tan fea. Vas a estar con nosotros allá.
The most satisfying part of this reporting has been that armed with knowledge, people can change the ending.
Hi, hello. How are you?
Buenos días.
How are you? Come on in.
Gracias.
How are you?
This wasn't an investigation where you got a smoking gun and you could go for the jugular. This is the one bad guy. It's just not like that. Yes, there's some guardians who really didn't do their job, and the medical examiner's office systemically is not doing a proper job in many of these cases. Many factors have led to this place, and it's really embedded in a lot of history. But to have a city this modern, this cosmopolitan, that still buries the unclaimed dead the way Jacob Riis recorded in the 19th century, just doesn't make sense. It's archaic, it's bizarre, and yet it also represents a truth about America, about the Western world, perhaps. That this tremendous inequality not only still exists, but has widened.
I mean, I wish life would have turned around. I wish the rehabs would have worked. I wish he would have kept the family, because we all still loved him. He couldn't help what he turned out to be. She always felt that sorrow in her heart, like, did I do that? No, you didn't do that, Kim. It was him doing that. It had nothing to do with you at all. Because he did love you. He did love her. He did.
My worry about having a child is that I will give my child my issues. I don't want to screw up my child like I was. There will always be emptiness. I'll never feel complete. I could have just told him how I felt and how he destroyed a lot of my life, because he did. And of course I wanted something from him. I wanted something, a reason why, or that he's sorry, or something. Like a little inch of him caring, which I'll never get. So, it sucks.
New York still has the draw. It's still a name to conjure with. It still sounds a musical note to people in some distant part of the world. New York is distinct. New York has always gone its own way. New York has its own bitter humor, its own kind of culture, its own kind of literacy. New York is not sentimental because the city does not care. The city does not care about you. That is one of the attractions of New York City, of course, is that it's this monster you have to fight. You have to actually wrestle with the city in order to just get the very basic necessities of life. And so the idea of the city having something on its conscience, this is a rather small blot, frankly. I mean, with all honor to the dead, they are dead.
I think that the city has always wanted to forget about Hart Island. The city has wanted to forget about the people who were buried there. It's wanted to forget about the fact that there is a potter's field, that there is a place where difficult stories are hidden. New York City is celebrated as the place where anyone can achieve their dreams, but those dreams haven't been achieved by everyone. It's true of people toiling away, digging out the tunnels for subways or building our skyscrapers. It's true of people who have wound up homeless or because a society shunned them, as happened during the AIDS epidemic. Those stories might not be flattering to tell. Even more, it might tell us things about our present that we'd rather not face. But we owe it to the people who have been buried there and are being buried there to bring their stories to light.
So my bill to move the jurisdiction of Hart Island, I believe that we're at a place where we could finally, the momentum is growing to make Hart Island a public place that is not forgotten. 1 million New Yorkers who built this city, who made this city the city that it is today. They should not be forgotten. They need a better space to be resting in.
¿Cómo anda, mijo? Yo le eché, bueno, más o menos le hice la ceremonia más o menos que la hacemos nosotros aquí. No hice más cosas porque como no sé cómo era la parroquia esa, ¿me entiendes? Pero bueno, le eché su perfume.
Sí, no sé que sea una creencia diferente.
Exacto, yo lo único que le hice fue que lo llené de perfume y yo le dije, ahora te vamos a atender como tú te mereces. Como atendemos aquí a...
Como nosotros tenemos a nuestro muerto.
Ya estás aquí con nosotros, la papi. A ver, en el año 1980 hubo un éxodo de cubanos por aquí, por el Mariel, que fueron para Estados Unidos. Y él se unió a toda esa aventura. Por eso era que yo quería que, como mismo él se fue por aquí, que siguiera por acá. Ya, estás aquí con nosotros nuevamente.
Por donde mismo te fuiste, ya volviste.
Así mismo, mira.
Por donde te fuiste, ya volviste.
Me volví.
Estás aquí con tus hijos, tus seres queridos.
Así mismo es.
Que por lo que tú luchaste y te sacrificaste, que fue por nosotros. Que por lo que tú luchaste y te sacrificaste, que...
Y ahora sí te vamos a atender como te lo mereces. Te lo trajimos, como tú lo querías.